sound of Universal Broadcasting Network at UBNradio.com.
One of them wanted to be the security guy. He claimed he was a security guy.
Welcome to an active version of Security Guy Radio with Chuck Harold and my special co-host today, Miriam.
Hi.
So Miriam's got a brand new show on UBN here. How long have you been on, by the way?
We do. Maybe 2 months.
2 months?
Not
Okay.
very long.
All right. So we thought we'd bring her in because Paul No-Show Bristow, Mr. Jarvis, is another no-show, unfortunately. Yeah, very busy with his loss prevention stuff. So Miriam and I were just sitting in the green room talking about security, and from a layperson, you were asking me a lot of interesting questions, right, about what you do and how you do it, and your position on security from a public sense, I think, was probably common, right?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you're not really sure what's going on, but you know something's not right. We're trying to figure out how to fix it.
Right.
And I thought we'd just bring you in and kind of talk about all this stuff, right?
I was fascinated. I couldn't stop asking questions.
What were some of your things that you thought were something you thought you knew that you didn't know?
We had a fascinating conversation about gun control,
Right.
which is a very hot button topic. But your insight, because I said to you, I don't know where I stand on gun control.
Right. I think a lot of people think they do, but
right.
I'm not sure, yeah.
And it's never been, for me, I know a lot of people grow up like I do. I grew up in the city in San Francisco. So guns weren't a thing, really. I just wasn't around it. So, people go one extreme to the other, right? Either get rid of all of them and it'll solve the problem. Right. And I don't necessarily know that that's true, but I don't know. I don't have experience. But so what I was fascinating is I found myself saying to you is I don't know where I stand on it ultimately, right? And so to hear all your information, it was fascinating.
Well, we're going to do active shooters today, and I think it'd be good. I wanted to have you on just kind of get an idea from your perspective on what all this stuff means, because there's a lot of talk about solving the problem, right? And one thing I believe about security, that it's three things. It's personal, it's local, and it's now, okay? So if you and I knew the same thing about security, and everybody in this building or this studio knew the same thing about security, there wouldn't be any problems, right? Because we all are going to act responsibly. We're going to treat people respectfully. And if one of us starts acting the fool, one of us that knows what to do is going to say, stop it, right? And I'm not going to go down that pathway to violence because I'm going to pull you back in, right? And so what's happening now is people like in San Bernardino and that we're going to talk about in a minute, right? The pathway to violence for these guys was out there. And we're now finding out that people knew about it. Some neighbors said, I didn't want to be accused of racism, so I stopped doing it, right? And when you have all those problems like that and people decide, well, I can't participate because I don't want to be accused of something, then you're not safe.
Right.
So you're only as safe as the guy next to you, right?
Right.
And I always make fun of the Walking Dead, but really it's a good way to study society, right? So everything is balanced. And if we had a real zombie apocalypse, and I'm going to say this is what it means, that right now 10% of the population acts like an idiot. That's the criminals, right? And I'm going to put terrorists in there, by the way, okay? Let's say 25, 30, 40% of the population start acting like idiots. What can we do about it? Nothing. That's a secret, right? Because UCLA only has 900 beds, and there's only so many ambulance calls you can go on a day, and there's only so many policemen to do so many radio calls, and it will all collapse in 1 second if, 10, 20% of the population change from the 5 to 10% that are bad, right? So the question is, what do you do? How do you solve that, right? And what do you hear as a citizen? What do you hear about who's solving that for you, right?
Right.
Homeland Security? Is that what they tell you?
We don't know. Like, ultimately,
Okay.
do you know? Yeah, Homeland Security, or is it your police officers? And, really quickly, it's so fascinating. I think this is why we started talking I'm a psychic and I teach meditation. And one of the things that we have in common, even though our worlds are very different, right, is that you stress for us to be present and aware of what's going on around us.
Right.
But that is the key to my meditation classes, and what I teach is be present. Because if you're present, you can think fast, you can think clear, and you can think with integrity and not with fear. And so it's fascinating that the two worlds collide and actually believe the same thing.
It's very similar, right? I assume you've never been shot at.
No, thank God.
Thank God. All right. I'm here to tell you, as a guy that's been shot at on 3 occasions, multiple rounds, on 3 radio calls, I'm still here.
Wow.
Because I was trained to do a certain thing when I got shot at, right?
Right.
And I was trained to do a certain thing before I got shot at and so on, right? So it's survivable, right? And we're going to talk about that a little bit with our experts, but I wanted to get people dialed in today, and I want people to pay attention that if you find yourself in an active shooter situation, you can survive it. In fact, if you do a few things, mathematically, you're probably going to survive. And we'll talk to our special guests about that today. So are you ready?
I am. I'm
I
so
think it's going to
excited.
be a good show. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's going to be a
thank
good
you.
show. Because I'm assuming a couple of these guys we're going to talk to might have been shot at, possibly. So it's
So
the
I'm
real
the
deal.
odd man out here.
Yeah,
I've
you got to
never
go
been-
get shot at so you learn all these things, right?
I'm good, thanks.
So I want to welcome our two guests, Mr. Justice Narvaez and Mr. Chris Grollnek. Chris Grollnek, welcome to the show, guys. Well, that's a lot of applause. There you go again, just cutting off the applause. You got to find a fade button, Jarvis. We'll find one. All right, so Chris is the co-founder of CGPGMG.com. Chris is a nationally recognized active shooter and critical incident response expert. And he works with other companies such as Robert at Elite2, ELITE2.com. And that's a land-based maritime weapons and training for civilians and law enforcement officers. And there's so much to cover today, so we're just going to get right into it, all right? So, Chris, why don't you go first and tell us a little bit about, or Robert, which one? I mean, which one's better? When do you guys pick who goes first
Chris,
and kind of explain? Chris, explain what you do and what your emphasis is, and then we'll talk about Robert's, or Mr. Justice, I'm sorry, and we'll go from there.
Hey, Chuck, thanks for having me. I think the best way to summarize what we do is we train what we call the actual first responders. I got into this business in 2007 while actively as a police officer training our court systems. And what I found was such a lacking of understanding about what the people inside an event could actually learn and try to mitigate. As you said, you only do what you're trained to do.
Right.
There's been studies in Princeton, Harvard, Wharton, several schools diverse psychology schools that measure the fact of what you and I would say, well, we're waiting, the normal cop, the normal person would rise to the occasion and try to save the day. But the reality is 97% of those people that we thought would rise to the occasion only rise to the level of training they have.
That's right.
And they get in this mode. I wrote a paper in the Atlantic years ago called Fight, Flight, and the Forgotten F, which is freeze. And so many people kind of freeze up and lock up. They get, what I call SOS. And it's not disparaging. It's just stuck on stupid. They don't know how to act because no one's ever trained them. And, we don't fear monger and we don't victim blame. But I've been in not just as you shot at a couple times, but I've actually been in the middle of two active shooter incidents as they occurred live.
Wow.
So one was at the McKinney Police Department in 2010, a very well-documented story. And what I was doing was reaching out to the people that came outside to see what was happening. And similar to a traffic wreck, they were kind of watching. And a year and a half later, with my family on the Cape Canaveral Causeway and about 9 police incident reports later, after wrecking a rental car, my daughter looks out the window and said, "Hey, Dad, someone's shooting." And we'd just been to Disney World, so being the good cop I am, I asked her what movie. And, she said, "No, really." And I looked over and I'm like, oh my gosh. So everybody was stuck on the causeway out of their car watching this incident. Man executed 6 people, 2 deputies were engaged in the gunfight. There's really nothing for me to respond to except get my family out of there.
Right.
What it did was give me a perspective, though, that few have. It's what the inside of an active shooter event looks like, which is defined as somebody trying to right some perceived wrong and trying to inflict as much damage as possible in a minimal amount of time.
Now, on my 3 things that I got shot at, I guess we wouldn't call them active shooter events, right? Because one was a radio call where a guy was getting a warrant served, and he didn't like that, pulled out his,
A routine call, right?
a routine call, and then he comes out with an assault rifle. I don't like to say assault rifle, but for our lay people, you know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
And semi-automatic, and my partner says, "Oh, don't come down Mesmer Street. It's a kill zone." And I look up, and of course, I'm on Mesmer Street, and the car starts taking rounds, and then another case where I was at a party, a guy followed me home from a party and pulled up in front of the house and shot at me and filled his my friend's brand new 200 ZX something or other full of holes because I die behind that. And then I was on a roof as a rookie, and I was doing a burglary investigation, and the janitor shot at us, right? And every time this happened, bullets, I'm not exaggerating, were inches from me. And you go into this, and Justice, maybe you can talk about this. or both you guys, but you go into this slow motion kind of a mode, which is really your brain perceives every little detail. And you don't really see the bullets, but you see remnants. You see, like the Matrix, you see little things happening around you that are super focused, and it gives you a chance to think quickly and respond to your training. And all I did was say, listen, that TAC officer at the police academy told me to get your ass moving if there's bullets, and I automatically did. I didn't even think about it. And I went from inches, close to the bullets to I'm in safety, took cover, could not return fire, that kind of thing. So if you've been shot at, you get it. Justice, talk to us about that, because you do a lot of live weapon training and stuff, right?
Yes, sir, I do. Well, basically, just a bit about myself. I'm a retired federal officer and U.S. Coast Guardsman. I went into active duty back in 1994, and I retired last year out in Los Angeles. And during that time, I guess you can say, just like Chris, I've had my moments where I saw a lot of deficiencies in training, and I saw that things just were not happening, certain type of protocols. And it wasn't just within Homeland Security or within the U.S. Coast Guard. It was within a lot of different agencies that I had trained with. Everybody from, Department of Justice to Department of Treasury, different local police departments, even foreign country militaries and their police departments, just doing special operations throughout Colombia, Central America, just seeing that there was a lack of a lot of different type of training.
What do you think the cause of that is?
About what's happening.
What's the cause?
I'm sorry?
What do you think the cause of that was? It's 2015, fellas. I got point shoot training in 1985, which is effective, and I still see departments where they don't teach that. It's like, okay, aim your eyeball and hit the target, and you got the 10 ring and you pass. It's like, no, I want to simulate a real combat situation, so I can participate in it and not freeze. To your point, Chris, right? Or one of the things that could happen. I just don't get why they don't train that way.
I think one of the primary issues is that they put a person through the academy. Let's just say any academy. They put them at 3-yard lines. They say, hey, take 5 shots, 5 seconds, ready, go. They listen to a whistle or they listen to a command, and that's all they're trained. They're stuck on that. So there truly is no muscle memory there. And what we do is we actually train them for real-world strategic survival, which means we give them a scenario, or we don't even tell them what's actually going to happen, and we just introduce them into that situation. Once they do that, they actually have to come in based off of training and experience and have to complete an objective. And while they do this, they actually have to start going through what's happening around me, what's going to be collateral damage. If I fire right here, what's going to be the backstop? They have to really take that moment, like you said, that Keanu Reeves moment, and see everything that's around them, bullets flying, people running, screaming, identifying the right threats before they pull that trigger. And the lack of that training is what's happening right now, just even across the U.S.
Well, it is. It's interesting you say that Keanu Reeves moment, because from my experience, and maybe you guys can talk to this, it is one view, right? And I can't describe it other than saying I saw everything at once simultaneously. I heard the shot. I heard the shot first, by the way. Then I saw the shots coming up through the roof in this burglary case when I was on the roof. And then I could see my partner, who was way off to my left on peripheral vision, saying, what was that? And it all happened simultaneously, but I was trained to move, and I moved immediately. And I'm lucky. I'm lucky I'm alive, but I really say it's my training that did this, right? So I am fascinated that you guys focus on, Justice, anyway, you do on first responder training. And I think we talked before the show about how a lot of guys and girls in the force are putting themselves through this stuff. Am I right? Right? In other words, they're seeking out this training because the department's not paying for it.
Correct.
You're finding that.
A lot of it, we'll say budget restraints, or a better word there. And the problem is, too, is that they're just not getting that option there. You have to think, too, that some of these trainers, they're only going to give you the training that's either mandated by their department, their agency, or by, state legalization that says this is the X number of hours you can receive per quarter, per year, semi-annual. And unless their trainers are trained beyond that last actual expectation, then there really is no forced option to them. I actually get officers that come up to me and say, I don't have that type of training. I don't receive that type of training. And knowing that I've done this for 20 years, these are my brothers and sisters out there in blue, whether it's military or not. You've got to think, I don't want these people to fail. So what do we do? What do we need to make a change to actually provide them with a different type of real world training? And
Chris,
that's why we're here.
Chris, do you think this is geographical, and situational. In other words, I worked in East LA, a lot of crap going on, a lot of shootings. I was exposed to that. But if I'm in, Columbus, Ohio, maybe not so busy. I don't know. Is that part of the disconnect between consistent training that actually works and what the state says was good 30 years ago?
Right. So I think you made some really good points. And if we could, digress back a little bit to the beginning when you asked a couple of the questions about Homeland Security, are you waiting for them to take care of you?
Oh, yeah.
Let's take a quick snapshot very briefly and then go to the 50,000-foot view. An active shooter, if we're going to specifically talk about that, or an act of aggression takes 0 to 7 minutes, according to the latest FBI stats. And I actually worked with those stats to help figure them out for them, with them. When I tell you we work, Justice and I, our alliance responds to with every 3-letter agency that would request us, kind of as a cutout, not to do things that they can't, but sometimes they're restricted by the heavy hand of the larger picture. For example, the Department of Homeland Security has grown to 250,000+ members. That's
God.
larger than the United States Marine Corps.
That's unmanageable.
Okay. Now you have the New York City Police Department that has 41,000 officers, but the FBI only has 35,000. So if you have the FBI in charge of the United States counterterrorism unit, and they only have 35,000, now that's agents and support personnel, and New York City has 41,000, there's a disparity somewhere. And you ask what the disparity is and what the problem is. Let's look at the description. The IRS, Internal Revenue Service, 81,000 personnel. So they want to collect your money. They don't want to investigate you, but everybody raises the heavy hand about investigations. So the police are stuck going off to people like Justice and saying, teach me tactical skills, which I used to do. I just frankly don't have time to anymore. Certain times I get involved, but I lost use of my left arm on duty and retired because of it, but not medically, if you will, just had to retire. I mean, not too good of a one-arm cop. But, going back to what you were saying is what's the problem? I think it's systemic. It starts at the top and it goes down.
Yeah.
When you look at the disparity of numbers, sheer numbers and volume, and who is actually carrying a firearm to protect us, the police are not going to protect us. And I am one. I'm retired. I still carry a badge gun. I tell everybody I have a badge, gun, and a bad attitude, no policy. So, it's great being retired. But the difference between it is people bring in this gun debate, and guns aren't the problem. People are the problem, right? So guns don't kill people, and if they say, well, an active shooter, we've had X number, and how do we stop it? How do you stop the girl driving her car into the Oklahoma City parade during the homecoming 3 months ago and killing 4 people? Which would classify as an active shooter event according to FBI statistics. So it's really not guns, it's cars, it's knives, it's pens,
right.
It's you name it. So we have to take this holistic approach look. So if we go back to that 3-number theory I have, and it's more than the theory, it's factual, and it's not statistical, because we can measure metrics of statistics all day long, make elephants hang upside down by their tails if you want. But there's 0 to 7 minutes is the national average an active shooter incident takes to start and stop. In 21% of those instances, police are involved. So that means the majority of time they're over before police get there. So what's that time? 17 minutes, the average response time for police.
Well, now that's gone up. It used to be like 10, 14. Okay, yeah.
It used to be 14. It went up to 17. And the reason is they're allowing in some of the more rural areas where shootings are taking place. And if you look at what the FBI categorizes as a true active shooter event, it is where 4 people are shot and 1 is injured. So the Tennessee movie shooting, that 1 person died, 9 people were shot, was not an active shooter event in conjunction with these stats. And that's why I said these are facts, not stats. So now we have a 0 to 17 minute window where, let's just use me. I'm a first responder, but not as a policeman. I'm in a movie theater, and somebody opens fire. I'm going to be by myself for 17 minutes. So
right.
If my wife and family are there, what are they going to do? And that's what I teach. That's where the whole Safe to Safest Alliance comes from. ActiveShooterExpert.com. How do you make it inherent to where we talked about rising to the occasion, rather the training interval cycle of rising to the level of training you have? And what does training look like? So we take a behavioral modification approach. And the last number I'll tell you is 17 to 23. Police show up, in 17 minutes, but they will not make contact with the first victim, would-be victim, or person for 23 minutes.
Now, we have a little different approach here in California, and I've been told this by some of the people that work at LA, at PD, and some of the bigger agencies. They're being trained. If you're the first guy on the scene, you happen to be an LCAR, you're a single-man unit, and you roll up and you say, oh, crap, I'm in Columbine now, my version, right? They tell you, go. You go in and do what you can to disrupt this guy, to interrupt his plan. It will slow him down. It'll change his target acquisition. It'll do a lot of things that may actually save lives, and this is some of the training they're giving out here. Would you agree with that?
63% of officers that respond alone get killed. So no. And it's a dangerous job, and my arm's a living, a good empirical data point to say, bad things happen as a cop.
But to your point, Justice, maybe if they had your training, maybe they wouldn't, right? I mean, I think that's part of it too.
Well, let me put it this way. I know exactly the training you're talking about, and some of that training I went through back in 2009 through probably about 2013. And what you're talking about is an equation they actually use. It's called time is life, life is time. So that's when that officer goes up. He's the first one there. He's got to go in. And the difference that they try and assimilate between is, I always use the example of workplace violence. If somebody goes inside there and they're directed only toward one person alone, and they have a handgun, they start shooting, well, what's the capacity of that weapon? And this is just pure example. Now, they're going to rush in and try and stop this person, obviously. But if all of a sudden they report that, hey, there's a lot of rapid gunfire, it's assault rifle, you can clearly hear the rounds just blaring off. This officer now has got to get his AR or shotgun and run in, because now that time is life, not so much the other way around where life is time, where he knows this person probably has a handgun. But even then, it's just all under assumption. So, myself, I'm kind of 50-50 when it comes to that. The way I kind of teeter on that same side is, if we're talking about a church, a school where kids or somebody else is involved, where they're just not capable of protecting themselves. Now we're talking about a totally different story.
Yeah. Now, and I distinguish between the let's call it the active school type of shooter or the workplace violence guy and the terrorist. So to me, the San Bernardino guy, he's still a criminal to me. By the way, they're all criminals to me. That's my perspective. Chris, I don't know if you share the same thing, but
absolutely,
it's great to call them terrorists and sex them up for Hollywood, but they're just a bunch of thugs, okay? The difference is the school shooter guy who's pissed off because Billy stole his cheese sandwich in 6th grade and he's going to come back and get revenge. Those people tend not to have an exit plan. They tend to come in, they do their thing, and when you look at all their manifestos and they do the forensic after the shooting, there's not a lot of exit strategy on these things. Where these terrorist guys or criminals, they want to try to live now. After 9/11, they blew themselves up. That's kind of different. Now it's like, I got an exit plan. I'm going to try and get out of here. I'm going to try to take so many people down. I have some bombs. I got first responder bombs to show up. In other words, it's a different sort of criminal to me. But I think, tell me if I'm wrong, the methodology to respond to this is and we're going to talk about citizens' responses too, right, Chris? I mean, how you in the movie theater off duty or our guest here can respond to it. I think the response to teach people they can survive it. There's a high probability if you do a couple of things, you're going to get out of it okay. I think that's what we want to get across today. And would you agree with that? These aren't. It's not. I'm absolutely going to die here. You will if you sit on your butt and don't move and don't do something about it, right? I mean, that's what I want to get across to people today.
So in our training scenarios, there's 3 things we focus on, and that's reacting, trying to get away as fast as you can, just as exiting the premises, and just going home, right? Like police, what do you say at the beginning of every shift? See you at the end of the shift so we can all go home.
Right.
So what we want to say is, if you hear something on your left, move to your right. If it's coming high, go low. If it's coming low, jump. Find an exit. Know where your exits are before you get there. And here's some straight up behavioral modification that we supplant inside your brain and say, listen, if you think about these things before, because we live in a different world, these criminals are out there armed. And, just like you, Chuck, I don't want to get lost in semantics and calling them whatever. But, there's so many ways that you have to look at this. Instead of letting fear paralyze you, you need to embrace it and say, look, I'm going to use it as adrenaline.
That's right.
Drag my family out, and I will go. And then people that will be able to stay there and fight, that's who you have to try to count on because we're 17 minutes away from the first officer, and my theory of one is none, just like a gun. Wait for your second officer because they're usually 10 seconds behind you. Now, if it's a school, I'm not going to tell you I would wait for an officer. I'd go in. I mean, I know that for a fact. So, and I've been in a SWAT shooting, two SWAT shootings and a shotgun assault aside from these active shooters. So, it's not that it's inherent. I was trained just like you were. Get down, get low, shoot back. Keep calm and return fire. I mean, a great saying.
I wanted to say as an outsider here listening to all of this, something in my world is I'm seeing more often now is fear. Neighbors, friends, family. Now. We're very scared, and what I'm learning and hearing from all of you is obviously whether it's training or something you're born with, because you are not fearful people, you respond quickly and you remember training and you think fast, right, of what to do and how to do it. But for someone like me, and we are scared, and we're scared sometimes before we even go to a movie now, right?
No,
You're
I get
walking
it.
with fear. And so it's fast. Again, to me, this is so interesting because something that I work with, my meditation classes are growing because the anxiety is growing.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And so
I hear the massages are up, all kinds of things like that are up because people are highly stressed.
They're stressed.
I think the San Bernardino thing tipped the scale, right? And I
Yeah.
hope it's going to allow people to understand this stuff and respond to it. So to me, talk about adrenaline, guys, right? I mean, we know what that is, right? To me, adrenaline is also, it can be classified as fear, and it's also get your ass up and get going, right? And so you talk about freezing. If you're scared and that's your feeling, my interpretation of that is I'm pumped up. That's how I look at it.
Oh,
I'm going to get this guy, right? So I'm going
Right.
to run to him. You're going to run away from him.
Right.
But if you freeze, that's not where we want people to be.
Right.
We want people running to the guy. That's a swarm. We'll talk about that in a second, right? Or we want people running away and getting out of there. And only as a
Right.
last resort do you want to engage, right?
Right.
But, I mean, is it little this making sense?
Absolutely.
Do you feel like you could do something now or you feel you couldn't before, right?
Well, I think still it's personality driven. Like,
Now I'm going to suggest to you it's training.
I
I don't think it's personality driven.
you think it's training.
If I put you, by the way, Chris, tell me I'm wrong, or Justice. If I put her through one of your courses, you guys confident she's going to, survive a shooting if she follows what she needs to do?
Let Justice answer first because I've got something I'd like to say on the backside.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. First and foremost, yes, she would survive, and yes, she would have a totally different type of mentality afterwards. I have one of the only sheepdog programs in the entire state of Oklahoma right now, and I get people that are armed citizens, first-time shooters, first-time gun owners that come out there, and after a 3-hour class, I've had people come in and tell me, Justice, I'm terrified of guns. I don't want to keep a loaded gun in the house, but I'm afraid because our society is turning upside down. What do I do? And I first start off by giving them simple examples. I talk about the weapon, how the weapon is safe. The weapon is not going to kill you. It's the mentality of the person holding or wielding the weapon. As I go through that, I actually break down the course for them. We start learning familiarization fire. We talk about safe practices, how to carry the weapon, how to keep it concealed or open carry. We go through the courses of fire. Once you do that, we talk about different type of terminology. And we do this repetition after repetition after repetition until it is muscle memory, until I look at them and I say, what are you doing next? And they just
It's automatic.
verbiage. It just comes right to them.
Now explain
And
the
at the end
sheepdog.
of 3 hours, they're like, this is great. We never thought we could do this.
Explain the sheepdog, sheep, and wolves to people that don't really know what that is. There's 3 types of people in the world, so right?
Oh yeah, those that just want to be part of the crowd. They just want to walk around. They don't want to be involved in anything.
That's the sheep.
Exactly. Then you've got those that are more proactive. They see what's going on. They can pick up the indicators. Those are the ones that are going out that are actually trying to go and protect their flock. They're looking out for the better interest. It's not just self-defense of them, self-defense of others. Because like Chris said, if we're going to have to wait 17 minutes and you're the first armed civilian there, if you got the right training, the right mental attitude, the perceived condition of what's going to happen, you're going to live, you're going to survive this encounter, then you're going to win. The way I see it is you are an asset to us, not a liability. You're a force multiplier.
That's a good way to describe it. And then there's the wolves who are the predators, right?
Right.
So now, do you think you're a sheep right now?
Well, where I was
No
saying,
offense, by the way.
No, where I was saying personality driven was I'm saying if I put myself with a bunch of other civilians in a movie theater and a shooter were to come in, personality driven is there's someone like me. If I hear even if it's not a gun, but sounds like a gun, I'll get up and leave and risk looking foolish, because I'll get out of a situation.
That's good.
Whereas other personalities will sit there and think, well, I don't want to look dumb, or what if it's not that, or what
Right.
and that's where I'm saying some things are personality driven on. But I hear absolutely what he's saying, and I obviously agree. And for me, it's not for me, I'm not about pro-gun or anti-gun. For me, it's about why are people not reporting when they see something that isn't right? Why are people not addressing when someone's behavior is not right? Why are they not doing something? That's, for me, my frustration, because I think if you address that first, gun control is leave it alone. Why are we not reporting something that's not right?
We don't want to be criticized for it. Right now, I mean, that's the thing.
Personality driven, for me, I don't care. I will look foolish to prevent something like that from happening. But how do we train other people to report? That's my frustration.
I'm leaning towards sheepdog on her, fellas. I was saying sheep, but she's getting a little sheepdogish on us. That's good for you.
Let me ask her a question really quick. Did you take typing class in junior high?
I am that old. I did take typing class, yes. We on an actual typewriter.
Okay, I'm not trying. I'm sorry.
No, I'm teasing. I did, though. I did, yes.
Processor. I'm old. Let's just get that out there. All right. So do you remember typing? It wasn't inherent for you, right? It
Right.
was something that you had to work at.
Right.
A teacher stood up and you might have been intimidated.
Yes.
And that would be the sheep in the class. She would be the sheepdog, the trainer. And then you had the wolf in class that was throwing things, making distractions. And very few students around you would say anything because they didn't want to get on his bad side. And you didn't want to be in that junior high mentality of, I don't want to be a snitch, or whatever the term is at that time. And of course, I'm using police analogies, and I apologize, but I don't want to be perceived as fill in the blank. So when when people like Justice, and I have years of experience, I'm a master firearms trainer, so I have years of experience teaching people. My daughter's a freshman in college who could probably outshoot all of us right now. She's been shooting since she was 4 years old. And women do not have something that men have as inherent, and that's called an id. And that is where the man sees a target, I got to do good. And my police brothers here will validate it. Every policeman tries to outshoot each other, and they shoot worse. And it's because they're like, oh, I got to get my ego. And women get up there, and they're like, oh, yeah, I'll go qualify. What do you want me to do? Like this, boom, 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 boom. And you're like, how'd she do that? Well, she doesn't really care. So what you're saying, you have a two-part message. You're saying you don't care what people think. That's because you don't have a worry in your mindset saying, and this is kind of psychology driven. I started a master's degree in psychology and ended up writing a thesis in active shooter prevention. So I stayed like I'm dumb. I have a double master degree. I was too stupid to get out the first time. So, on the psychological portion though, you're thinking of, it's okay for me to look foolish and it's okay for me to make a report. But if you're with your best friend in a radio studio, say, Chuck, and you say, hey, oh my gosh, I heard something outside. He's it's a backfire. Don't worry about it. It's because he knows what a gunshot sounds like and he knows what a backfire sounds like. But if you were to say, hey, there's someone beating on the door, he wouldn't think twice. He'd get up and go investigate who's at the door. Whereas some people would shut out the light, lock the door, and hide under their desk. That is the stasis that we are breaking. We need to remove that freeze mechanism in people because, it's atrocious. I never talk about school shootings. I'm going to violate my own policy. In Columbine, I've got video, and I have the whole video, and the kids are hiding under desks while these other two hunters, the wolves, are hunting them. Now, when you see that, it will drive you to get training somewhere. You don't want to go too far right and get 9 assault weapons and go home with 40,000 rounds and say, I'm ready for war. And you don't want to go too far left saying, no guns for anybody, because that genie's out of the bottle. We have 300 million guns in America. If we outlaw them, who's going to keep them? Justice?
I've got them.
Yeah, right? Well, for training-wise.
Yeah,
I'll take them. So I think, you know what, just like Chris is saying, if you put your mind right into it, and everything becomes muscle memory, you will get the big picture of everything that is going on. That when people say, oh, the hair on your back rises, It's literally like that. It's kind of like a perceived notion of what's going to happen. So when you walk into the room, it should be an automatic. I do this all the time, and I'm sure Chuck and Chris and all of our partners do it. We walk in somewhere, the first thing we look at is where's the next exit?
Yep.
How many secondary, primary exits are there here? If something goes down, which way am I going to move or take the family to? The next thing is we never sit with our backs to the door. We sit with our backs to the wall. We look at other people. I worked in the anti-terrorism unit for almost 6.5, 8 years, really. And so just looking at people and observing them, watching them, their mannerisms, their body language, everybody tells the story. The thing is, how do you want to read it? And the more proactive you are at it and the more training you get, the more comfortable you're going to be in that flock.
Do you guys look for improvised weapons? The giant sugar shaker at the restaurant? I mean, if I got to pick it up and hit you in the head with it and then move, that's what I'm going to do, right? And I always look for weapons wherever I am in case I'm not able to get to my gun or something like that, right? So those are things you got to think about. That Combine thing, I teach that in my active shooter course. It's very sad, Chris, because I have the actual tape of the dispatcher, and you hear her saying, oh, they're outside the door. Here they are. They're coming. I hear them, and you hear gunshots going off. And now here's the perfect point I want you to understand. This teacher did exactly what she was supposed to do. She should be commended for responding to her training. It was the wrong training. She was trained to gather the kids up, and the kids were running out the back door, and she says, no, come back, get under the desk. And all the kids in the library died because she put them under the desk, and they came in and systematically just went bang, 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 and shot them fish in a barrel, right? I can't criticize her for that because she actually responded to her training. So I'm suggesting to you as a layperson that if you get training like this, you will respond in a positive way, and you won't be the victim.
Well, and like I had mentioned earlier when we were speaking, what you all are saying as well is to be aware of your surroundings, be present. And
Always.
That's something
Presence,
that
like you said.
we teach in meditation, which is people aren't present. And if you are present and you're aware of your surroundings and the people around you, you'll notice if something is off, or you'll feel if something is off. Like you were saying, the hair on the back of the neck. We all feel if something isn't right. But if people aren't present, they're buried in their phones, they're worried about work or whatever that is, it can make or break a situation. And that's why, again, there's an alignment of what you speak about and what I teach in meditation, which is be present and be aware and don't check out. Know what's happening and respond to what's happening, whether it's a boyfriend breaking up with you or something bigger and scarier than that.
So did you guys hear about this teacher, and I can't remember where it was, someplace Midwest, and he bought a can of peas for all his students. It was like junior high or something. It wasn't, I don't think it was high school. And his idea was, we can't have a gun in here because I'm not allowed to carry a gun as a teacher, and maybe it's not a good idea for a lot of reasons. And he said, listen, if somebody comes in here and starts acting the fool, we're going to throw 50 cans of peas at him simultaneously. And he was highly criticized for that, right? I mean, the NRAF came after him, said it was ridiculous and blah, blah, blah. But let's talk about target acquisition. Let's talk about the physics involved in trying to shoot somebody and how not easy it is. It's easy on a range, right? But in combat, Chris, are the numbers still the same, or 85% of cops in a shootout miss? Because guns are flying, elbows and asses, and everybody's like, what do I do? And stress and whatever. And the reason a lot of people get killed in active shooter situations is because the victims are not moving and they're not engaging the suspect. And therefore they have a high, I think a 50%, at least a 50% hit rate, correct?
Yeah, and what you're talking about is going back to what you initially said about reactive instinctive shooting, point and shoot. If I point my finger to my far right and my eye turns to where my finger is, it's inherent to know that should be where the muzzle of my weapon is. Therefore, I can point and shoot. We quit teaching that in the police department because they were worried about target acquisition, discriminating against your target, who you're going to see, what you're going to do. And Justice can probably talk to you at another level. It's been a couple of years.
Okay, so they did. I was right. I went to the academy in '83. They did teach that to us.
Yes,
but I didn't know they actually stopped teaching it. That's interesting.
Right. Now we teach what Justice was saying, different range models depending on the master. And getting back to one of your initial questions also is, why is there a disparity? And I think the larger question or larger answer is there's not a standardized policy. So you've heard of Alert, right, in San Marcos, Texas. It's a training academy where police go to learn how to stop active shooters. The only problem is that's where all the money is going, is to the police. And I am one. So we want our cops to have what? More cops, more guns, more equipment, and of course raises, because it's a dangerous job. The thing is, like, let's take New York, for example. They just received $1 million or $100 million or $1 billion, whatever. That many zeros, it doesn't matter. They bought 1,000 officers, 1,000 rifles, more equipment, more bat trucks, which are ballistic trucks, and several extra pieces of ammo, equipment, etc., and support personnel. Well, why not set up like the ultimate community policing program and put the citizens through a informal training program and add to it and extrapolate that money out so it trains everybody, not just the police, and you don't just get more guns, beans, bolts, and band-aids.
I'm with you, and I love my brothers and sisters, and but as you said, Chris, they're not going to show up for 17 minutes. They're going to be there after most people are dead, unfortunately, okay? So
Right.
I agree with you. We need to teach the civilians something. I'm not saying arm civilians, by the way. I don't have a position on that. If you want to arm yourself, I'm all for it, Second Amendment and everything. But, throwing a can of peas at the guy, running, doing a run, hide fight's a great training tool. I think the State Department did that one. And now the sheriff has one too.
Houston took it, and I actually helped write the PowerPoint.
Yeah, it's a
for
great
it.
one. It's a great one. So I agree with you.
Long time ago.
I think we're going at that backwards. We're making police safer. Police are better engaged for target acquisition and shooting. That's all great, but I don't think that's helping the active shooter. Now it may help in a terrorist situation where you have some kind of, I don't know if you remember the SLA thing in the 70s in LA, the big shootout. The terrorist Symbionese Liberation Army, what it was. That's a SWAT. That's a tactical thing. Cops could probably be better at that, but I don't see giving all the cops this money if they're not going to be there when the shooter. And give me the numbers again. It used to be that every 1 minute, 2 people get shot, basically, more or less. Is it something like that? Average shooter's done in 4 minutes.
Active shooters, you're in the seconds now for kids because they don't know that they're supposed to point and shoot, or they don't know they're supposed to aim. They just do reactive instinctive shooting, and that's why the hit ratios for active shooters have gone up. And also, we need to remember this very terrifying and tragic statistic, and it's really not a statistic, it's just a fact. These people are very calculated. They're very callous, and they're exceptionally smart. And you mentioned it yourself. You said they have manifestos, and they write what they're going to do. They usually carry it out, and they don't have an exit strategy because death is the ultimate strategy to the end of their whatever. Right. Righting their perceived wrong, I call it. And where a terrorist, they want to live to fight another day because it's about religion, ideological, political motivation, whatever. And they're usually the ages between 18 and 26. Well, active shooters are 5-year-old girls and 96-year-old men. And the earliest school shooting, take a wild guess. What year do you think the first school shooting took place in history? Just a wild guess.
I happened to do a show on that, and I know it was in the 1700s.
You betcha it was.
Because somebody's bungee got killed, and the teacher shot the kid.
That's right. But think about that. It's
been going on forever.
People always answer either Columbine or Texas, University of Texas. And you know what? That's pretty foolish because it's naive not to do your history or homework. But then again, I don't really want my wife doing homework on that, looking up, active shooter events. So I believe in a fair, balanced system. As a cop, you asked about the Second Amendment. I'm free to give my opinion rightfully. As a cop, I don't think anybody should have guns. As a citizen, I think everyone should have two. I call myself deficit neutral.
Well, let's talk about the psychology, which I know a little bit about on these guys. So we're going to call it the pathway to violence, right? So if we look at these people, I think people assume shootings have been going on in schools since the 1700s. And also another thing people assume is that this guy's aggressive. This guy is on a pathway to kill me, and therefore he's mad, he's angry, he wants to kill me. No, that's not what these guys are. They're cognitive aggression. They are thinkers. They're planners. They are cold-blooded. They're emotionally withdrawn. They have no empathy. Because even if I didn't like you, I couldn't just kill you if I have a relationship with you. It's not that easy.
Right.
Now, the primal aggressor, right, and this is all work from John Bryan, a primal aggressor is a guy that yells and screams and comes and makes a big stink and he's getting all red and hot. We can handle that guy. We hit him on the head with a mallet and put him in the back of the ambulance and take it. We know what to do with that guy. But what do you do with the guy that's planning behind the scenes and planning to get rid of you and hasn't told anybody about it, right? And those are the guys that show up. So one tip, if you happen to be in a situation where somebody shows up, is if a guy walks in with this 1,000-yard stare like a zombie, and this is why I make fun of the zombie apocalypse all now, because this is really kind of a zombie apocalypse in a way. These guys are emotionally calm. If you see the videos of active shooters, they're walking around nice and calm, nice and slow, bang, 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 shooting people. I've seen a dozen videos on that. And the reason is One reason is that they have committed to this project. They know they're going to die. They bought into it. They've convinced themselves of this conspiracy with themselves, right? And they're not yelling, screaming, running around. You're not going to get a forewarning of a guy walking in the building saying, I'm going to shoot all you people right now. They're just going to walk in and go bang, 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 like it's, breakfast at Denny's and nothing's wrong, and you're going to be surprised by that. Right. So that's why you as a civilian have to recognize what that looks like, right? So there's a lot of moving parts on these things, but there's so many people with so much data on it. I think a lot of it gets lost in the news. We just hear the sound bites. We hear these simple answers to things, and it's I don't want to sound crazy, although I've been accused of that on several occasions, but I don't think this is that difficult a problem to solve. Am I wrong, fellas? I mean, we know the facts. We know all these. I'm not going to call them stats. I'm going to call them facts. There are solutions out there, but where's the political will, to do it? I think there's a lot of politics involved, and that's screwing it up a lot, I think. That's my editorial. What do you guys think?
I'll take this one real quick. First of all, I think the political will is exceptionally spot on. I will say this, and I was shocked at this. I'm not going to name the two people that did it, but I'll tell you the Department of Homeland Security paid for it. They spent $1 million recently in a very gun-friendly state. They invited 360 or they sent out surveys to 360 people and invited 360 respondents. They discriminated against all law enforcement officers, all military, anyone that's been in a shooting, anyone that had been the victim of a violent crime, and they had to be a concealed handgun holder license that had passed the test, carried a gun for more than a year, and they got 360 of these people together. They put them in a mobile shoot house with the ultimate training munition. It's just like a paintball, but it's bigger than Sims and much more painful than Sims. And it cycles through any firearm. My friend owns the company, Phoenix RTB. Shout out to you, Tony. So they put these people in, and it was right after Charlie Hebdo. So they would put them in. They did 12 iterations of 12 people. So there's your 360. And the only rules were you had to carry your gun like you would if you were on the street as a concealed handgun license holder. You can't have your hand on your gun. You have to be sitting in the room at the table with 11 other people. So you had 12. They gave everybody an orange crayon and a white piece of paper, and they were practicing drawing pictures of the prophet, whatever they were doing. And they had 30 seconds to 3 minutes before the doors burst open and two simulated terrorists would come in and start shooting at them with these UTMs. Now, everyone had on heavy armor and masks and everything, and their adrenaline was pumping, so they were expecting this. So I'm reading the data after this, and I'm like, oh man, there must be a great hit rate. I mean, a lot of CHL holders. Astonishing, right? 360 people, only 5 of them scored more than 1 hit on both would-be terrorists. Only 7 of them scored 1 hit on the would-be terrorists, and only 1 person, a woman, made it out without getting shot. All 359 got shot at least once, simulated, of course, and they interviewed her afterwards, and I rarely say this, but it was kind of funny because she had a very thick accent. And they asked her, how'd you survive? What made you do that? Why'd you get out? Why did you, grab your gun and go? And she turned right to that microphone on TV and said, well, I saw a radio interview. Well, I mean, I watched a TV interview, and just going back, very funny. And I saw this guy named Chris, and he told me that I need to leave, so I left. And here I am to talk to you. So my mind changed about more guns, more freedom. And I think it's a fantastic political line. The thing is, it's more training, and it's more people like Justice out there that can provide that training, because if we're trained like the typewriter analogy, now we can probably type as a very functional person, right?
Well, I tell people who ask me all the time, should I get a gun? And I say, hell no, I don't want you ever having a gun. And they go, why? Because I love you, but you're an idiot. You would kill yourself, right? And that just takes a culture change. I mean, if you were raised with guns and you grew up in the house and you went squirrel hunting and all that stuff, that's a different thing than I'm a brand new 50-year-old down the street in Burbank who's scared and want a gun. I'm not sure it's your right, and I would never impose upon saying it's not your right, but maybe not the best tactical decision. The better thing for that sort of person is to do what you just said, is hit him in the head with a can of peas and run like hell, right? Now, that training sounded a little skewed to me, like they were trying to say, oh, look, see, more guns aren't the answer, see, because, all these people got killed and they had a gun. And we had a thing down two streets over from me the other day. A guy pulls up in his car, music blaring. Neighbor comes out, would you please turn down your music? No. Gardener comes over, hey, turn down your music. The guy pulls out a gun and caps both of them. Right now, Burbank's not exactly the ghetto. Okay, this was a very strange anomaly that went on, and my neighbor put something on Facebook and said, "Oh, where's all the people with guns that are supposed to protect us?" And I said I was in the hot tub. Otherwise, I would have busted a cap in his ass. Okay, but we're trained to do that. Or the more smart thing for me to do would be not engage the guy, because I'm not taking out my gun unless I'm going to kill you. I am not taking out my gun. That's just the way it goes. Because if I can't get you and put you down, and I don't want to get in a gun battle, all right? That's not my job to get in a blazing gun battle as a retired policeman. But if I can put you down and solve the situation, I will, right? So I get that study, and I would say that if you know what you're doing and it's going to work, but the lady was actually smart, right? Because she solved it by doing what was necessary at the time, and engagement at that close proximity might not be the thing to do.
Well, it's good. It's good empirical data, but I'll tell you this, so you have the full story, because I won't hold anything back. There were 2 SEALs that were, from the special teams.
Those were the terrorists?
Yeah, the simulated terrorists. And they were from dev groups, so no one had a chance anyways.
Yeah, that's true.
And you're right. It was a left-wing, freak show, whatever, something I don't believe in, because they were trying to disparage all concealed handgun holders and shame them into giving up their guns. And
right.
The only thing it did, it actually reversed. 359 people went out and signed up for new training locally all over the 3-state area that they invited them from the concealed handgun compact. So it was an interesting study. You could probably find it if you look hard enough about the Truth About Guns, which is a left-funded group. However, I do believe that training is the answer to everything.
Yeah, and interestingly, I was talking to Miriam before the show that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, because Security Guy Radio doesn't let facts get in the way of a good conversation, all right? But don't most of these shooters don't have prior gun experience, right? I'm going to go get a gun and kill people. I got to go buy one. I got to go down the shooting range, like in Virginia Tech. The guy was shooting targets on the ground, and nobody called about that and said, "Hey, that's kind of weird," right? So a lot of these guys are not the greatest shooters. They're not highly trained in target acquisition. They have a high death count because you're not moving. I mean, so you're not going to get a Navy SEAL that usually comes in and starts capping rounds at people. So that is more data to give people a little more edge and to understand that they can survive this stuff. So I want to hit a couple things. Tell me what SAFEST is, the acronym, SAFEST. What is that?
Strategic Alliance for Education of Security and Training.
Oh, I like
because
that.
Our mission is to really change the dynamic of when I speak to the rest of the world and say, what do you think of a security guard? And they return their answer to me. And, hey, I saw the movie Paul Blart. I know all about security.
Listen, I ran 2 guard companies for 10 years. Right? It's not far from the truth, by the way. That's true.
Right. So, but there are there's exceptional security people out there, and there are people in the security industry that augment our federal government every day. They just don't work at the level of the uniform with the badge, and we don't need any stinking badges. So, the thing is SAFEST is, I got 15 experts from around the country to come together. They all own their own businesses. We augment each other. But the most important thing to know about us is when something goes inherently wrong in this country, one of the federal agencies with a 3-letter acronym is going to call one of us, and we will respond.
You cut out a little bit, but I think we got most of it in. Now, Justice, tell us about one of your initiatives and what is your biggest takeaway from all this training and your alliances that you have? What are you trying to solve with your training? First responders we talked about, but really, give us your pitch now. Why do I want Cobra City PD to come down there and train with you guys?
I think one of the biggest things is that they need to see that there is a real world strategic survival, that there is a plan, that it's not just stand at the 5-yard line, at the 10-yard line, listen for a whistle, go by command, waiting for these things to happen. It's got to be something that's trained instantly off of muscle memory, so they can constantly react within milliseconds to an actual situation. So they're more aware of what's going on around them. They need to be able to move and shoot, talk to their partners, actually convey messages. They can read each other's body language. They're trained in care under fire procedures. They have the highest level of training. That's what I'm trying to throw out there, that pitch, to try and give them that next level, that next step that I know that they're lacking. And I've seen it even just out here in Oklahoma.
Now, what I think is if they got if law enforcement first responders had this training, I think statistically they're more likely, I hate to use that word, I apologize, Chris. I think factually maybe they're more likely to get in a shooting off duty than they are on duty with this scenario, an active shooter. In other words, as a cop, you get the radio call, it's probably over by the time you get there. But as in the case in Colorado, right? Weren't there some off-duty officers in there?
There's another Colorado shooting with a female officer that walked in and shot the guy, noticed something was wrong. He pulled out a gun. She pulled out hers. He was over before he started.
Yeah, and this stuff happens all the time. There's a case at Disneyland in July. A guy got in there with a gun, passed all the fancy, bag checks and all that nonsense, walked around the park. They stopped him outside. And there was an incident last week down there, too, where they popped somebody on Facebook saying I'm coming down to the park, and they found him, and he was loaded for bear, ready to go, right?
Oh, wow.
So it's just a matter of when this is going to happen. And I think this is an excellent point that if our Leos got this training, I think they're going to use it off-duty. And, I have an idea that if every on-duty, off-duty cop in the United States had a beeper, that's how old I am, right? And it went off, and it meant turn around and look because you happen to be close to something that's going on. And if they were trained, to your point, Justice, they'd be able to do something. Mostly it's going to be observe and report, but push comes to shove. If I have to take out my gun and do it, I want to be trained properly to do it. So I have the confidence to survive myself. I wonder if a lot of cops think, I'm not sure I can survive a guy with an AK-47 in there, right? But maybe you can with the training. I think you can. That's just my belief,
That's right. Even here in Oklahoma, we actually have 16 different CLEAT accredited courses, and the CLEAT is the equivalent of T close and post. And what I found out too recently over the last probably 8 weeks is I gave a concealed carry class, which is not like what the state mandates for a regular civilian. This was actually courses for undercover policemen, if you will, or that special agent, or someone in the private sector, a PI. And when I ran some people through this course, it was amazing that just the level of what they did not know.
Right.
And these people had between 9 and 16 years. And what I showed them, they were like, this stuff is too advanced. Can you give me the lowest level course? And I'm like, buddy, this is the intro class. I don't know what to tell you. So imagine how I felt about that. And all kinds of sirens, whistles, you name it, were going off. And that right there just led me to believe, and this was not just I'm not calling anybody out, but let's just say it this way. It was from some feds to locals to state law enforcement.
Yeah, this is very empowering stuff. Now, we got a minute left, so I want to get over to your website. So, Justin, your website is elite2two.com. And 2 stands for what?
That's a dual company, tactical waterborne officer and tactical weapons and operations.
Now, that's a story how a tactical waterborne officer got stuck in Oklahoma where there's no water. We'll have to tell that story later. That's very interesting.
I will.
But this is good stuff. And Chris, give me your website and how we get a hold of you.
ActiveShooterExpert.com. But, I want to throw a shout out. Look up Guard 911.
Okay.
GUARD 911. It's a notification system for if cops are close, you can show up.
And we'll put this on the YouTube video. I'm going to put all your links on YouTube so you can watch the show later and get all these connections and go from there. Guys, I think we solved the problem. I think we're real close. Excellent show. Did you learn something? Do you feel safer?
Yes, I did.
Are you a
learned
sheepdog
a
now?
lot.
I think you're a sheepdog.
I think so.
Can she graduate to a mini sheepdog, guys?
I think she can find the wolf.
I think she can get it. All right. Thanks again. Tune in next week for another exciting episode of Security Guy Radio. Until then, be safe.